best example of how it manages outflows of its workers. Regulating the role of private intermediaries and preventing illegal recruitment. This has become very important in the South Asian context. Preventing irregular migration, looking at mapping out labor skill requirements with the demands in some of the main receiving countries, so kind of doing a data mapping exercise and kind of trying to gear the capacity of workers, like Philippines does this, Sri Lanka does this to some extent. Discussing mutual recognition, totalization, very important area. You're talking about social security agreements. So with some of the countries India has already signed, US would be a major market to really look at for this, but it's proven difficult. Visa facilitation, repatriation, and so on. So if you again look at it increasingly, this is happening gradually. There are already major agreements that have been signed in some parts of the world, like North America, with the Caribbean countries, between the Latin American countries, and with France, Spain, etc., North African countries, with some European countries. So this is going to be an increasing trend, and Asia is just picking up in this area. Now, since this is about India and the US, but I didn't want to dwell too much on this, obviously a lot of trade and migration issues have arisen between India and the US recently. I mean, the H-1B visa hikes, the recent thing in the state of Ohio regarding government outsourcing, and obviously this again calls for a greater role for the inter-country industry councils, the US-India Business Councils, for instance, the industry associations, joint business forums. So there's going to be the continued role of these kinds of forums to put on pressure and to allay protectionism, as Mr. Nayan Chanda was also mentioning. But I think another thing that we in India also need to look at, Indian IT companies, and they're doing this to some extent, we have to also rethink the way we engage and the way we sensitize. I mean, there are lots of studies which say that, $1 of outsourcing is actually beneficial still to the US because it's creating complementary flows of trade, it's going to lead to, higher profits, which will get reinvested, and so on. But I think the general public will not understand that. They will just see the job being outsourced and lost to some firm in Bangalore. So therefore, it's also important to have more of a visible presence by Indian companies in many of these countries, to think of engagement strategies apart from just having offshoring, but to do complementary kind of presence through investments, through subsidiaries, through local employment creation and more sensitization. So, and that's happening. TCS and some of these companies already have big centers there. They are hiring locally, but I think it's incumbent of looking at complementary strategies of engagement, not outsourcing along with investment and other flows. And of course, it might need a rethink by India in other areas, such as the signing of the government procurement agreement. I mean, at one time, India was the one that resisted it, but today, given the likely potential for government outsourcing in the future, it may be a small part of the market today, but it may grow in future, and therefore, I mean, if you want to preempt protectionism and to have your say, you might have to rethink your role in some of these plurilateral kinds of agreements. So on concluding thoughts, it's a major challenge, as I said. We need to do this, but how are these regulations to be coordinated? This becomes important because of the kind of growing power asymmetries that we're seeing, or the rise of many other emerging markets which are equally powerful. So who's going to really call the shots? What is the content, and how is this content to be determined? Who determine it? Okay, and given countries with, again, starting off with kind of different principles and market structures and histories, it's difficult. How can these be effectively enforced? Are we talking about supra-regulators? Are we talking about multiple regulators? Are we just... So, I mean, I don't have answers to these. And, I just thought of some possible approaches. I do think increasingly that, yesterday I was listening, there's a lot of talk about regulators in countries, regulators across countries, international regulators, all that. I think this is really the era at many levels for public-private partnership. And here I'm talking about both industry associations, regulatory bodies, governments, and existing multilateral institutions. All of them together really have to define and reshape this agenda. So on complex issues, though, I feel that maybe the WTO kind of route, this multilateral consensus-making route, may not be the right approach, because you're getting into stalemate situations. So there are issues where there are like-minded countries. It may be better to start with smaller groups, with plurilateral kinds of approaches. Maybe G20 is one such forum, but even G20 is proving difficult, with countries having very different monetary kinds of authorities and different exchange rate mechanisms. But maybe this is the way you start step by step, because on complicated issues, say recognition and so on, you need to have smaller, understand groups to understand the issue, to get some initiatives going, and then confidence building